My parents let my sister live in my investment property for free without asking me. Mom said, she's struggling unlike you. After 6 months of no rent, they saw a letter from the bank and finally understood why I wasn't worried. She needs a fresh start, Emma. You have to understand. My mother's voice crackled through the phone, a mixture of pleading and that familiar guilt-tripping tone I've grown to recognize. I stood in my Manhattan office staring out at the skyline while trying to process what she just told me. Apparently my parents had given my sister Jessica permission to live in my investment property rent-free without even consulting me. And he didn't think to ask me first. I kept my voice steady, though my hand gripped the phone tighter. It's my property, Mom. I bought it with my own money. Well, yes. But Jessica's going through such a difficult time after her divorce. She has nowhere else to go, and you're doing so well with your finance career in New York. You don't even use the property. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 silently. At 32, I worked hard to build my career as an investment banker, saving every penny to invest in real estate. The Chicago townhouse my sister had apparently moved into was my first major investment property, one I carefully renovated and had been preparing to rent out at market value. Besides, my mother continued, she's family. Family helps family. Family helps family. The irony of those words wasn't awesome me. Where was this family-first attitude when I was struggling through college, working 3 jobs while Jessica partied her way through her trust fund? How long has she been living there? I asked, dreading the answer. Oh, just a few days. She moved in last weekend. Your father gave her the spare key you left with us for emergencies. Of course he did. The emergency key I trusted them with, now used to install my unemployed sister in my investment property indefinitely. And when exactly were you planning to tell me? Well, we're telling you now, honey. And Jessica is so happy there. She's already talking about repainting some rooms to brighten up the space. My stomach dropped. She's what? Oh, nothing major. Just some accent walls. You know how good she is with interior design? Remember that phase when she wanted to be a decorator? Yes, I remembered. Just like I remembered her photography phase, her yoga instructor phase, and her organic juice bar phase, all expensive ventures funded by our parents that ultimately went nowhere. Mom, she can't just Emma, please, my mother interrupted. Can't you just help your sister this once? She's family. I took another deep breath, my mind already formulating a plan. You're right, Mom, she is family. Oh, sweetheart. I knew you'd understand. You've always been the sensible one. I murmured, opening my laptop and pulling up my banking records. I have to go now, client meeting. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, a small smile playing on my lips. What my family didn't know was that I've been preparing for something like this for months. Ever since Jessica's divorce, I'd watch her pattern of landing on her feet through family bailouts. I'd seen the way my parents' eyes turned to my success, my stability, my assets. I opened my bottom desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder labeled Chicago Property. Inside were documents I prepared with my lawyer 6 months ago, just in case. Legal notices, property regulations, and most importantly, the paperwork for the property's new status as part of my corporate holdings. You see, the townhouse wasn't just in my name anymore. It was now owned by my LLC, with strict legal protocols for occupancy and use. Any unauthorized residence could be considered trespassing under corporate property laws. I set it up this way specifically to protect against family emergencies. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Thanks for letting me crash at your place. You're the best big sis ever. BTO, do you mind if I redo the kitchen cabinets? The current ones are so dated. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up my office phone and dialed my lawyer's number. Sarah, it's Emma. Remember that scenario we planned for with the Chicago property? It's happening. Yes, exactly as we predicted. Can you start the process? I spent the next hour reviewing the documents with Sarah, setting everything in motion. The property management company would be notified, formal notices would be prepared, and the corporate oversight protocols would be activated. What about your parents? Sarah asked. They're not going to be happy when they realize what's happening. They're not going to know until it's too late, I replied. Besides, they gave up any right to an opinion when they handed out my spare key without permission. My computer pinged with an email from Jessica. This one with attached photos of furniture she was planning to buy for her new place with our parents' credit card. No doubt. How long do you want to wait before initiating the process? Sarah asked. I thought about all the times I'd watched Jessica take advantage of our parents' generosity, all the times they'd expected me to understand, to accommodate, to give in because family helps family. Let's give it 6 months, I decided. Long enough for them to think they've gotten away with it. Long enough for Jessica to really settle in. Long enough for everyone to forget whose property it really is. And then we remind them exactly why you don't take what isn't yours, even if you're family. I spent the next few weeks watching from afar as Jessica documented her new life on social media. There she was posting photos of the vintage chandelier she'd installed in the dining room without permission. There were the Instagram stories about her fresh start, and how sometimes the universe just provides. Every image, every post, every modification to my property was carefully saved and documented. My parents called regularly, always dancing around the subject of the house, praising Jessica's initiative in fixing up the place. They never once mentioned rent, utilities, or the fact that they'd essentially given away my property without my consent. Jessica's doing so much better now. My mother gushed during one call. She's really finding herself, and it's all thanks to you, honey. You're such a good sister. I made non-committal noises while adding another set of unauthorized renovation photos to my documentation file. The folder was getting thick with evidence that would become very important in exactly 5 months and 3 weeks. Though, my mother added hesitantly, she was wondering if you might consider putting the utilities in her name, just to help her establish some credit after the divorce. And maybe, well, she was thinking about getting a dog. The building does allow pets, right? I muted my phone for a moment to laugh quietly. Actually, Mom, I need to run. Big meeting. We can talk about this later. That evening I received an email from my property management company confirming they documented all changes to the property since Jessica's unauthorized occupancy began. Every modification, every violation of the corporate property agreements, all meticulously recorded and dated. My phone buzzed with another text from Jessica. Hey sis, quick question. Is it okay if I list one of the spare rooms on air just to bring in a little extra cash while I'm job hunting? I added the text to my documentation file and checked my calendar. 5 months and 2 weeks to go. This wasn't just about the property anymore. This was about boundaries, respect, and teaching my family that my success didn't make me their personal safety net. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for family is let them face the consequences of their actions. And in 5 months and 2 weeks, there would be consequences indeed. 5 months into Jessica's fresh start, my property management company sent me their final report. The document detailed everything. Unauthorized renovations totaling over $23,000, multiple building code violations from her amateur improvements, and most importantly, evidence of the illegal air operation she'd been running from my spare rooms. I sat in my office reviewing the photos and documentation. Jessica had completely transformed my carefully renovated investment property into what she called her bohemian dream space. The elegant gray walls were now splashed with garish colors. The high-end appliances I'd installed had been replaced with cheaper models. She'd sold the originals online according to her social media, and the carefully maintained hardwood floors were now covered in what she termed artistic epoxy designs. My phone buzzed with yet another text from her. Emma, you'll never believe how amazing the house looks now. I'm thinking of starting a home renovation blog. Maybe this could be my new career. I added the message to my documentation file and checked the calendar. 2 weeks until the corporate audit I'd scheduled. 2 weeks until my family learned exactly what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Are you sure about this timing? Sarah asked during our final review meeting. Your sister's birthday party is the day after the audit novices go out. I smiled, remembering the invitation I'd received. Jessica was planning a huge housewarming/birthday celebration at my property, of course. She'd already invited 50 people and hired caterers, all funded by our parents. The timing is perfect, I replied. Let them celebrate. It'll make the notices more impactful. The day before the audit, my mother called. Emma, honey, you're coming to Jessica's party tomorrow, right? She's put so much work into the house. Everyone's dying to see what she's done with the place. Actually, Mom, I have some business in Chicago tomorrow. I'll stop by. Oh, wonderful. Jessica will be so happy. She keeps saying she wishes you were around more to see how she's transformed your old investment property into a real home. My old investment property, as if I'd abandoned it. And Jessica was doing me a favor by claiming it. By the way, my mother added, your father and I have been thinking, since Jessica's done so much to improve the place, maybe we should discuss transferring the deed to her. You're doing so well in New York, and this would really help her establish herself. I gripped my phone tighter. We can discuss everything tomorrow, Mom. That night, I boarded a flight to Chicago. In my briefcase were multiple copies of the corporate audit findings, legal notices, and documentation of every unauthorized change and violation. I also brought the police reports from neighbors complaining about Jessica's airman guests, along with proof of her online income from renting out rooms in a property she didn't own. The morning of Jessica's party, I arrived at the property early for the official corporate inspection. The property management team and my lawyer were already there, along with a licensed contractor to assess the unpermitted renovations. The building code violations alone, the contractor whistled, reviewing the changes. The electrical work in the kitchen isn't up to code. The epoxy floors weren't properly sealed. And don't get me started on the load-bearing wall she removed to open up the space. I documented everything, then checked my watch. 3 hours until the party. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. Where are you? The caterers are here, and I need help setting up. Detail. Wait until you see what I did with your old home office. It's a meditation room now, complete with a water feature. I forwarded the message to my lawyer who added it to our file. The notices are ready, she confirmed. Would you like us to serve them during or after the party? I thought about my mother's casual suggestion of transferring the deed about Jessica's entitled alterations to my property. About 6 months of watching them take advantage of my success. During, I decided, let them celebrate first. Let them really showcase everything they've done to my property, then we'll show them exactly who owns this house. And it's not just me anymore. The guests started arriving at 4. I watched from my car as Jessica welcomed everyone, playing the role of proud homeowner. Through the windows, I could see my parents beaming as she gave tours, probably bragging about all her improvements. At exactly 5:30, as the party was in full swing, my property management team arrived with the official notices. I stepped out of my car, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the house I'd bought with years of hard work and careful planning. Time to remind my family that sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones you thought would be free. Emma. Jessica squealed as I walked in, rushing to hug me. You're finally here, isn't the house amazing? I've done so much with it. Behind her I saw my parents' faces light up. They hadn't noticed the team of people following me in, clipboards and documents in hand. Yes, I said calmly. Let's talk about exactly what you've done with my property. The room grew quiet as my lawyer stepped forward, notices in hand. Jessica's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips as she finally registered the official-looking documents being placed on her upcycled coffee table. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about standing your ground and letting others face the consequences of their actions. And as I watched realization dawn on my family's faces, I knew this was just the beginning. The silence that fell over the party was deafening. Jessica's perfectly manicured hand trembled as she picked up the top document from the stack. What is this? She stammered, her eyes scanning the official letterhead. This, my lawyer, Sarah, stepped forward, is a formal notice of unauthorized occupancy and property violations issued by EJM Holdings, LC, the legal owner of this property. EJM Holdings? My father interrupted, moving closer. Emma, what's going on? I maintained my composed demeanor as party guests started whispering among themselves. EJM Holdings is my corporate entity, Dad. The property was transferred to it 6 months ago, right around the time you gave Jessica my emergency key. My mother's face paled. But that's just a technicality, right? This is still your house. No, Mom. This is a corporate property subject to corporate rules and regulations, rules that have been repeatedly violated over the past 6 months. Jessica's boyfriend, a self-proclaimed real estate investor she met at a yoga retreat, tried to interject. Hey, come on, this is family stuff. You can't be serious with all this corporate mumbo-jumbo. Sarah pulled out another document. Actually, we're very serious. We have documented evidence of multiple building code violations, unauthorized structural changes, and most concerningly illegal subletting through air. The crowd grew quieter. Jessica's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the epoxy-covered floor she'd been so proud of. Those were just temporary guests, she protested. Friends staying over. Friends who paid $200 per night through your air listing. I asked quietly, pulling up screenshots on my phone. The one where you advertise this corporate property as your own. My father stepped forward, his face reddening. Now listen here, Emma, your sister needed help. We were just what, Dad? Just giving away property that wasn't yours. Just allowing unauthorized renovations that have compromised the building's structural integrity. Just looking the other way while Jessica ran an illegal rental business. The contractor who'd inspected the property earlier stepped forward. Ma'am, would you like me to detail the code violations we found? Jessica burst into tears. This isn't fair. I made this place better. Look at how beautiful everything is now. I looked around at her improvements, the removed, low-bearing wall, the amateur electrical work, the tacky epoxy floors. Better? You've created thousands of dollars in damage and violations that will need to be corrected. Thousands, my mother whispered. Sarah nodded. The initial estimate for bringing the property back to code is approximately $45,000, and that's before we address the illegal rental income. My father's face went from red to purple. This is ridiculous. You can't do this to your own sister. Actually, I can, and I'm not doing anything. These are simply the consequences of her actions. Actions you enabled. The property manager stepped forward with more papers. We have documentation of every unauthorized change, every violation, and every illegal rental transaction. We also have evidence of the original fixtures and appliances being sold online. Jessica's tears turned to anger. Those ugly appliances, I replaced them with better ones. Those ugly appliances were commercial grade and worth over $15,000. I replied calmly. Appliances you had no right to sell. My mother grabbed my arm. Emma, please. We can work this out as a family. There's no need for all this legal nonsense. I gently removed her hand. That's where you're wrong, Mom. This stopped being a family matter the moment you and Dad decided to give away property that wasn't yours. The moment Jessica decided to treat my investment as her personal renovation project, but I needed a fresh start, Jessica wailed. After the divorce, your fresh start doesn't entitle you to my property. I cut her off. Your divorce doesn't give you the right to make unauthorized changes, sell things that aren't yours, or run an illegal rental business. The party guests were quietly filing out, leaving behind half-empty glasses and plates of untouched food. Jessica's boyfriend had mysteriously disappeared along with most of her so-called friends. Sarah cleared her throat. According to our documentation, Miss Jessica Harrison has earned approximately $22,000 through unauthorized short-term rentals of corporate property. This income, along with the proceeds from selling corporate assets, will need to be repaid. Jessica collapsed onto her vintage-inspired sofa. I don't have that kind of money. I spent it on improving this place. Improving? I laughed softly. You mean damaging. Every change you made without permission, every structural alteration without permits, every violation of building code, it's all documented. And it all has to be fixed. My father tried one last time. Emma, be reasonable. What do you expect your sister to do? Where is she supposed to go? I met his gaze steadily. That's not my problem, Dad. Just like it wasn't your property to give away. Jessica has exactly 30 days to vacate the premises and begin repayment of damages and illegal rental income. 30 days, my mother gasped. But all her things are here. She's built a life here. She built a life on stolen property, Sarah interjected. The 30 days is a courtesy. Given the extent of violations, we could demand immediate evacuation. Jessica jumped up. You can't do this. Mom, Dad, tell her she can't do this. I watched my parents exchange helpless glances, finally realizing they had no power here. Their casual disregard for my property rights, their entitled assumption that Jessica's needs trumped my ownership. It was all crumbling around them. The property will be restored to its original condition. I continued calmly. Any cost not covered by the repayment of the legal rental income will be your responsibility, Jessica. And yes, we will pursue legal action if necessary. Legal action, my mother whispered. You'd sue your own sister. You mean like how you tried to manipulate me into transferring the deed to her? I asked. Yes, Mom. I heard your suggestion earlier. Consider this my response. The property manager handed out final copies of the novices. All communication regarding this matter should now go through our legal department. Any attempts to further modify the property or continue unauthorized rentals will result in immediate legal action. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Jessica, happy birthday. Consider this your wake-up call. Sometimes the best gifts are the lessons we never wanted to learn. As I walked out of the house, my house, I heard Jessica's sobs, my mother's pleading, and my father's angry muttering. But for the first time in months, I felt at peace. Sometimes standing your ground means being the bad guy in someone else's story. But I'd rather be the bad guy than the doormat they tried to make me. Let them call me cruel, let them paint me as the heartless corporate sister who wouldn't help family. I knew the truth. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for family is let them face the consequences of their actions. 6 months after Jessica's disastrous birthday party, I stood in my newly restored Chicago property surveying the changes. The walls were back to their original elegant gray. The load-bearing wall had been properly reinstalled, and new commercial-grade appliances gleamed in the kitchen. Every repair had been documented, every code violation corrected, and every trace of Jessica's improvements erased. The cost of restoration had totaled $67,000, significantly more than the initial estimate, once contractors uncovered the full extent of the damage. After lengthy negotiations through our lawyers, Jessica had agreed to a repayment plan, using her portion of our grandparents' inheritance to cover the damages and illegal rental income. My phone buzzed with a text from her, the first direct communication we've had in months. Can we talk in person? No lawyers, no drama, just sisters. I considered ignoring it, but something in me had shifted over the past few months. Coffee tomorrow at 10. The shop across from my property. When I arrived at the coffee shop the next morning, I almost didn't recognize my sister. Gone were the bohemian clothing and carefree attitude. Instead, Jessica sat in business casual attire, a laptop open in front of her, looking professional. Thanks for meeting me, she said quietly as I sat down. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Oh. I kept my tone neutral, noting the spreadsheets on her screen. You were right, she admitted, surprising me about everything. I took advantage. I assumed that because you were successful, because you were my sister, I had some right to your property. I didn't respect what you built. I sipped my coffee waiting. These past months have been educational, she continued. Living with Mom and Dad again, actually having to budget, facing real consequences. She laughed softly. Turns out I'm not as helpless as everyone thought. She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was a business plan for a legitimate home staging company. Remember how I used to talk about interior design? Well, I'm actually doing it properly this time, taking courses, getting certified, building a real business plan. No shortcuts, no handouts. And the funding? I asked, genuinely curious. I'm starting small using the skills I have, building a portfolio. Once I've proven myself, I'll apply for a proper business loan. No more relying on family money, or she hesitated, or taking what isn't mine. For the first time in years, I saw my sister really saw her. Not the entitled woman who had taken over my property, but the person she could be when she actually tried. Mom and Dad aren't happy, she admitted. They wanted me to fight the repayment plan to guilt you into backing down, but I wouldn't. I needed this wake-up call, and we all did. She pulled out a check. This is the first installment. I know it's going through the lawyers officially, but I wanted to hand you one in person to show you I mean it. I looked at the check, then back at my sister. Keep it, I said finally. Put it toward your certification courses instead. Her eyes widened. But the repayment plan still stands, I clarified. But this one payment, consider it an investment in your future, a legitimate one this time. Tears welled in her eyes. But these weren't the manipulative tears I was used to. I'm so sorry, Emma, for everything. I know. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before she spoke again. Dad's selling his boat to help cover the repairs. He said it's the least he can do since he gave away your key. And Mom's actually talking to a therapist about her enabling tendencies. I raised an eyebrow. This was unexpected. Your actions didn't just wake me up, Jessica explained. They made all of us look at our patterns, how we took advantage, how we justified it because of family ties. She gathered her things, preparing to leave for her certification class. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I know I need to earn that. But I want you to know you did the right thing. Even if it felt cruel at the time, you did what none of us have the courage to do. You broke the cycle. After she left, I walked back to my property. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, highlighting everything that had been restored. But maybe I realized more than just the property had been fixed. That evening, I received an email from my father. The subject line read, "Apology and amends." Dear Emma, it began. I'm selling my boat and some other assets. Not because Jessica asked me to, but because I need to make this right. I gave away your key, betrayed your trust, and then had the audacity to defend it. You deserve better from your father. I saved the email, noting how different it felt from his usual defensive responses. Change, it seemed, was possible when you force people to face the consequences of their actions. The next day, my property manager sent over the final restoration photos. Looking at them, I realized something profound. This hadn't just been about protecting my investment. It had been about establishing boundaries, demanding respect, and making the hard choice to prioritize justice over temporary peace. The property was mine again, truly mine. But more importantly, my family was finally learning to respect not just my ownership, but my right to stand up for myself. Sometimes, the biggest gift you can give your family is the opportunity to grow up. Even if that opportunity comes wrapped in legal notices and hard lessons. And sometimes, the strongest foundations are built not on endless giving, but on firm boundaries and earned respect. Standing in my restored property, I smiled. The walls weren't just repaired, they were stronger. And so was I.